Welcome to part 3 of falling techniques, how to fall backwards without getting hurt. In the first part of the section, we talked about how to fall forwards. In the second part of the section, we talked about how to fall sideways by turning your sideways fall into a safer forward fall. But when we're falling backwards, we don't have that option anymore. We're not going to be able to fall backwards and turn all the way around and turn it into a forwards fall. So we need a totally different technique. Just like with the other parts of the section, I'm going to give you demonstrations that show you exactly how to do it. But before then, I want to give you a little bit of background about falling backwards. There's 5 big mistakes, 5 deadly sins of falling backwards that people tend to make that lead to injury, and then I'll show you how our falling technique for falling backwards provides a solution for each one. Now, mistake number 1 when people are falling backwards is locking the knees. So if you're falling backwards, what you don't want to do is lock your knees. When you do that, you're maximizing the chances of coming down backwards on one of those exposed hip bones. Now, just like falling sideways, we want to avoid at all costs coming down directly on the hip. Whether that's sideways or from the rear, it's still a chance of breaking your hip. That's what we don't want. So mistake number 1 is locking your knees. Mistake number 2 when falling backwards is reaching up with the hands. Almost like you're reaching up to grab something that's not there. Okay? When you do that, what you're doing is making your body bigger. You're making yourself taller. Okay? The taller you make yourself, the further you're going to come down. Mistake number 2 is reaching up with the hands. Mistake number 3 that people tend to make when falling backwards is actually really common. I think all of us at some time in our life have probably done it. Reaching back with your hands. So as you're falling backwards, what you don't want to do is reach back with your hands. That's a really good way to break your wrists. The falling technique that I'll show you in just a moment for falling backwards shows you exactly what to do with your hands, but what you don't want to do is reach back. So mistake number 3, reaching back with the hands. Mistake number 4 that people tend to make is holding on to their stuff while they're falling backwards. Now, the falling technique I'll show you in a moment shows you exactly how to use your hands to break your fall. What you don't want to do is hold on to your stuff. If you're falling backwards, unless you're holding on to your baby or something, you want to drop your stuff, and I'll show you why in a moment. And mistake number 5, and perhaps the most deadly, is leaning back with the head, like this. In 2000, 46% of all fatalities from falling came from traumatic brain injury. So mistake number 5 is leaning back with the head. Now, I'll give you several demonstrations of how our falling backwards technique works in just a moment, but here's the main idea you want to remember. When you're falling backwards, the main thing you want to remember is bend your knees or sit into your fall. By sitting into your fall or bending your knees, what you're doing is effectively reducing the distance between you and the ground as you're falling. The higher you are up, the further you're going to fall, the harder you're going to hit. By sitting down, by bending your knees, you're reducing that impact. When you're falling backwards, you not only want to bend your knees, you also want to use your hands to break the fall. Same falling backwards. Everyone's done it. Okay. Now we talked about broken hips. Falling sideways onto the hip, I'd say, is the number 1 best way to break your hip. So if you're going to fall sideways and land right on this sideways, that's probably your number 1 best way to break it, which we don't want. Okay. Now falling backwards, it's the same bone. If I fall at an oblique angle, like this, what's going to hit first? The hip, again, right? It's still exposed. Same thing this way, okay? So either sideways or kind of sideways at an angle is bad. If you're falling backwards, am I going to have you try to turn all the way around?
No.
No, I'm not. Okay. I mentioned all those deadly sins of falling, and I'll tie them all into the same instant technique. So if I'm falling backwards, we don't want to bend the knees, or we don't want to lock the knees. We don't want to lean back with the head. We don't want to reach up with the hands. We don't want to lead back with the head. And we don't want to reach back with the hands. So I would bend my knees, come come down. Okay, what I'm going to do with my hands, I'll show you how to use those. I want to do this several times so you can kind of get the feel for it, okay? What we'll do is as you're falling back, you bend your knees, bring your hands down, palms down, flat to break your fall, okay? So I'm just going to fall, just like that, okay? What you're doing by doing this, I don't know if any of you have ever taken judo or anything like that. What they teach you the first day, because they throw each other all over the place, right? What they teach you the first day is how to break your fall. So as you get tossed, they show you how to use your hand one way or use your hand the other way. This is the same idea. As you're falling down, what I'm going to do is just bend my knees. I'm obviously not leaning back like this.
Yeah.
I'm tuck my chin. Luckily, most people tend to naturally do a little bit of that. Okay? We kind of intuitively know not to bang our head, but bend the knees. Just like that. Generally speaking, when people fall backwards, they usually trip over something, and they usually have stuff in their hands. Okay, so if I was walking and talking on my cell phone, going backwards, blah, 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 blah. It's the same thing. Quick bend to the knees, bring your hands down, and you can do it again and again and again. Here's the idea with bending the knees. Okay? Now, I mentioned in the beginning how if you're getting straight and getting really tall, if I was to fall backwards like this, which I'm not going to do, okay, I would maximize the impact to my head. By simply bending my knees, I'm cutting the impact down by 50%. Okay? So if you find yourself falling, just sit down.
Yeah.
That's the quick tip.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about all the other stuff. Just bend your knees. If you're falling back, just bend your knees. And no matter what, remember, you're falling anyway. You're going to be on the ground one way or the other. You have to hit the ground so you can minimize your impact by bending your knees.